We are meeting today, all on sunny.
Tēnā koe karena. E a koe te ahua ki te rorohiko, tēnā koe. Tēnā koutou, ngā mihi atu ki a koutou. Ngā karakia, e te ato e tuwhirana ngā ngākau katoa ki koe. E kore hoke e ngaro i a koe te me huna. Whakahange e iho tō wairu e tapu hei whakamai ngā whakaro o mātou ngākau. Ke tino aroha ai. Mātou ki a koe, ke tika ai te hakanui i tō ingoa tapu ko iu koroti hoki tō mātou ariki. Amen.
Cool, Floyd, any apologies? No apologies?
I mean,
To receive and confirm the apologies which are nil. Someone move that, please. Okay. Confirmation of agenda, item 1.3. When to confirm the agenda. Someone to move that, please. I'll move that. And Sonny, second. That the Taharoa Domain Governance Committee confirms the agenda for 9th of August 2022. I have some of them.
Yes.
Move, second that. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Item 1.4, conflict of interest declaration. Any? No. Presentations, nothing today. Item 3.1, confirmation of committee minutes 10th of May 2022.
I'll move that as a true and accurate record.
Okay, thank you. And I'll second it. Is Karen able to?
can you hear me?
Time to respond.
Yes.
Loud and clear.
Oh, excellent. Thank you.
That the Taharoa Domain Governance Committee confirms that the minutes of the committee meeting held on the 10th of May 2022 are true and accurate record.
All those in
All those
favour?
in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Carried. Item 4, Taharoa Domain Quarterly Report for May to July 2022. Somebody move that. Second that. That the Taharoa Domain Governance Committee notes the Taharoa Domain Quarterly Report for the period of May to July 2022. Thank you.
Morning, committee members. So I'll take the report as read first off, but there are a couple of things that I do want to bring to your attention because they were discussed in the last couple of meetings and there's been progress. The first thing is the signage plan. So we've completed a walkthrough of the domain and a draft of the signage plan incorporating sites with cultural significance will be provided in the next quarterly meeting, and the Jack Rudolph, our EU Relations Manager, will be in contact with, I want to say Snow, but to just make sure that what we're putting into the plan is accurate. And the other thing that's been a big topic is around water safety. So the hot topic due to drownings and the near drownings recently. So Surf Life Saving New Zealand leading a project that's supported by New Zealand Emergency Services in the promotion of water safety. And Kaiwi Lakes will be part of a pilot project that they're doing using flotation devices this summer. It's exciting for us because Surf Life Saving, their focus is obviously beaches, not fresh water. And therefore we're grateful that they're including us in this project. And I hope to provide further update in the next quarterly meeting and or may be able to arrange for the project lead just to come and have a bit of a kōrero about the project with you all in November. But it's looking really positive and certainly something that we will be implementing prior to the summer, or for the summer, I should say. Any questions on the report?
Thank you, Nadine. This is a wonderful, wonderful report. Can you please talk more into the Surf Life Saving project and the fact that lakes being used as a pilot? Because I think it's a significant brand shift for them, like following surf. And I mean, you may not know about the project yet. But
Yeah, I'll speak about what I do know through the chair, but it is so. One of the things that they pointed out is that although their focus is saltwater and beaches, they still look to for advice around lakes and things like that and rivers, hence why the project kicked off. So, and how we came to be part of the discussion is through the recent, drownings up at the lakes, but also in Whangarei district on their beaches. And then so conversation with KDC and NRC, that's how we came to join the discussion. But I think it might be best if I get the project lead to actually come and have a corridor with you guys. He's super keen to do that, but I just wanted to preempt the conversation first. And then in preparation for the next meeting so that you can prepare your questions, provide some information in the next report.
thank you, Nadine. I think that would be good, Mr. Chairman, if that was to happen, because that would help to lead the thinking through this public forum into the community about the health and safety approaches that the council is taking overall and the Taharoa Domain Committee is taking, the concern this committee has and the opportunity that's there that we're all leaning into. I think it's absolutely to be applauded. Thank you.
Hey, just a question on the signs. Does that completely cover all the signs up there?
Sorry, can you repeat your question?
The renewable, the signs.
It's not to replace, or it's really just to come up with it, because there's, I guess, what's known as signage pollution. There's just that many signs, people don't see the signs. So it's tidying up the sign and just making sure that the signage is are in the appropriate place. And actually the messaging is really clear, because there's some conflicting signs as well. Because we've got different organisations, there's KDC, there's NRC, there's DOC. Yeah, so it's just making sure that the messaging is clear, it's consistent, and it's in an appropriate place. Yeah, hoping to share with you, because there is something in the current reserve management plan, which just, but that doesn't show actually where our signs are. And what I'm hoping to share with you is, I've only got it in the draft yet, and it's really just a concept. It's not something that I think should be shared at this stage, of where the signs will be, what the signs will say, the use of bilingual signs as well, and as well as, the possibility of QR codes for the other, for other languages, because it's obviously very multicultural, Ivy Lakes, especially in the peak season. So there's a lot of things that have to be taken into consideration so that we get it right.
Talking about the signs and the understanding of all the multicultural languages that may be there, in regards to that, it would be a humongous taking.
And so will you look to other organisations and other councils? Just what do they do? What's what's best practice, and take the lead of others who have already gone down this track. FNDC have done a lot of work in this space, so we are looking to them quite a bit.
So the form of educating would have to be multicultural as well?
No.
I mean, a simple thing like the water's heavy. You sink a lot quicker in there than you do in saltwater.
Yeah.
And it's simple things like that people don't know. They think that, you swim, the bath is the bath. And that's not, the reality is that if you can't stay on top of the water, you'll go down. And I think basically this is what's occurring.
And also, a lot of the parts of the lakes out there just drops away for the 3 feet.
Yeah.
If I can just speak to that please through the chair. So one of the things, so with the scope, it's more than just the signage. It's the scope of the project also includes education. So not just with staff, but the idea is with staff, with community, with iwi, as many people that can be educated in the dangers of the water, but how to use the flotation devices, because you know it's like Bondi Beach up there in summertime, and there's just not enough staff that could ever be in place at any given time. So if there's the more people that we can get educated in how to use these devices, or even just educate people on water safety, the better off we'll all be.
Boundaries for swimming, etc. Really need to be pushed home. Don't go beyond there because you'll get in trouble. I know that sounds very simple and basic, but that's the reality of it.
Any more questions for Hayden? Karen?
I'm interested in asking about the budget reallocation or repurpose to support that MB Tourism Infrastructure Fund. What's the repurposing? What is that going to be used for?
So as part of, there was a project that was put in place, a CapEx project originally to upgrade the changing sheds at Pine Beach.
Yep.
And given all the compliance or the ablution facilities that we need in order to be compliant under the camping grounds regulations, those funds are being repurposed to address not just the changing sheds, but also the things that are required for compliance.
Okay. Is that budget sufficient?
No, in short, sorry. But here's why we'll go to look for funding externally.
Oh, right.
Because it's a project that is so TIF funding, what is it called, Tourism Infrastructure Fund, Kauri Lakes, and what happens with the infrastructure and the quantity of people, and it's a high, it's well known area. This is a good project to secure some funding.
Oh, thank you. Interesting around the water take. So I see NRC have said that it's unlikely that it's had a negative impact on the water levels up there, and they've spoken with 5. Have we identified that there's 5 water take permitted activities going on up there? Or is there others still yet to be identified?
There's another presentation that's coming up after this that's especially related to that. Or
right. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. The report we've just heard, support. Those in favour? Aye.
Aye.
Good, maybe. Letter to Department of Conservation.
Conversation.
Yeah. I thought
Great.
Northland Fish and Game Council and doc replies. We'll be talking about a typo there.
Oh, is that me? Sorry. So, yep, you'll have to just be with me because this is my first time and Darlene has handed this over to me. But obviously we wanted to make some decisions around the trout and the implications of removing the trout or not replenishing the trout to the lake. We sought scientific evidence or data from DOC, and you will see DOC's response in that letter there.
Sorry, so yes, I have many questions here. And I'll get to statements later, Mr. Chairman, but just a question. So just to be clear, that the Fish and Game Council has written here to the Department of Conservation as one of the 3 scientific parties of the working group, yeah, saying, how's your research going?
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just to be clear, my understanding of the response from DOC is basically in the penultimate paragraph, which is they're doing some monitoring, but they haven't actually answered the question here. And instead, that, if you like, that sense of openness isn't here. And so, but what DOC is saying is that it's up to this committee to request this of DOC, not the Fish and Game Council.
Yeah.
Is that?
Yeah.
That's my
That's
understanding.
a clear read. So it's okay. So thank you. So that's your understanding as
That is
well.
my understanding, yes.
I'm just trying to get to where we're exactly at with this.
Yeah, so I think in the April meeting, we agreed that we needed DOC to provide scientific data, for which would enable this group to make better decisions around the trout and the, is it June lake galaxis? I'm going to say that off the top of my head, but I feel like that's an imaginary. It is June lake galaxis, you're nodding. So we were going to be able to make a decision based on their scientific research. My understanding from the letter is that they have not been able to provide that research, and so we are where we have always been with no data to make a decision. I think the next steps would be for us to contact DOC and specifically request that research or that project takes place.
So I kind of, thank you, Hayley. So I have a further question, Mr. Chair, which is, what is the nature of the relationships, the organisational relationships that you get, frankly, this sort of nonsense going on that we're seeing here, where this committee has said we need an evidence base and we need this evidence base. And then someone else who's a party says we need an evidence base. And then one of the parties who's involved in that says, well, we've got an evidence base, but we're not going to tell you. What I'm saying is, what are we doing about the table around which everyone gathers to be able to address and all the concerns and the matters that are at work here? And I'll just say this, because a couple of months ago, the chairman of this committee resigned over this issue and the absence of an evidence base for the decisions of this committee. And then you get, frankly, this long letter from DOC saying, oh, it's all about this committee. And until the last paragraph, they're kind of delaying on releasing any of the information that they have. And I'm going, how do we get through the making of the relationships that are here and the table around which everyone gathers to get the best outcomes for the lakes? And so I don't know, Hayley, if you have further direction that you're seeking from the committee, because the recommendation here is simply to note the letters, the correspondence that's here. So I'm keen to know where you're looking at heading here regarding direction that you're needing from the Taharoa Domain Committee.
Well, I mean, it's always been KDC's position that our preference is that this is a collaborative committee and that there is representation from all of those parties around the table. And so we're not reliant upon letters like these, and it is a conversation and everyone's bought in. I can tell you that we have escalated it to Louise to have a conversation at the CE level. But beyond that, I guess we just go back and ask again with support of Louise's conversation at the CE level to reaffirm that we require that information to make those decisions.
I was going to say, this has been going on for quite a while, and Dave West was originally the person we first. We haven't really had a report from Dave.
I believe he declined to attend.
And we have, today we have Stephen Saul from DOC. And if he would like to add any comment, how does the committee feel about that?
I'm happy to. When are we going to give statements on this? Because I was part of the committee that made that decision to stop the release of trout based on the reserve management plan. And that had, I think there's two different things going on here, and I'm wanting to defend our decision.
Yes, and if I could just hope for the Whakaaro Karen there, you know, like this letter is actually quite true, but our real problem was that we had no data in the first place. And to go from a control that's already low, or supposedly low, which we don't even know, your control has to be what's there now. Because you have no idea of what the control was. Like, we're not even doing studies on how much the kombucha and fish have increased. All we're saying is it's just a general statement that they're just going haywire. And generalized statements really aren't too good for getting things done. But I actually agree with what they've got in here written down as maybe using Kobe as a control and getting rid of the pest fish and then transferring. I agree with that. I would agree with something like that, because you'd have to get rid of the pest fish. It'd have to be a huge undertaking using either, I don't know, poison, toxins, or whatever they use. The netting, the actual physicality of it. What do we do? You know, general statements are, oh, there's nothing alive in there now anyway, except the pest fish.
Karen, can you hear that, Sonny?
Oh, sorry, Karen. So I'm just having a bit of a discussion in regards to where this letter is actually, in my opinion, it's actually not a bad letter. It really covers all the aspects, but one word in there that I really not too happy about is that the population will be dwindling to extinction, you know, and they're talking about trout. Trout will never be extinct. But our Junelais galaxis will, if we don't take some steps.
What you're saying, Sonny, is that they put that in there just to create a little bit of fear.
I'm
with the traffic.
Well, you know,
We're going to be without trout.
going back to what
He said, and
our chair resigned. Our chair resigned because he believes that that he'll be responsible for the extinction of Junelais galaxis. We're all responsible because the threat is there. Threats, the predators are there. And they're not even predators, they're more about taking up space, like colonization of another species. And that's what's happening. And we need to have some sort of controls, first and foremost. And I don't know what the controls would be, apart from transferring Junelais galaxis to the lake after all the pest fish has been killed or made extinct in that particular lake.
Chairman, if I may, so Sonny is talking right into the core of the issue here.
Yeah, he's on.
And is identifying a significant scientific project which may be required or may be in the future. And what if we come back to, with all due respect, if you like, you kind of go, those are stories for another day, and it's an important vision and goal because no one wants these galaxies to go, to be extinct. The important thing is, if we come back to the matter here, which is about the sharing of information and the good relations, if you like, so that everyone can get to the kind of scientific project that Sonny's speaking of in the future, so that everyone goes, yes, we all accept the data, we all accept the truth of what's happening, and here's where we're going to need to go into these sorts of solutions. I guess the question from Fish and Game is a really simple one, which is, what's going on? And this committee is is needing to grapple with this right now regarding finding a way for a table to be rebuilt around which all the people can gather. This committee meeting is a very formal structure. This may not be the right structure or as a formal every few months committee meeting for these discussions. There may need to be a workshop gathering at which Doc comes and talks, and there's a free exchange of ideas that Dave West comes. How do we get the people to come to the table? If the Taharoa Domain Committee is in charge of the table, which is what is in Doc's letter, then it is on the committee to say, well, here's a pānui, everyone has to come to address what's going on. And I think that's the key, is that Doc has said, Taharoa Domain Committee, you have the mana here, you are the leaders, you are in charge, this committee. And so with that in mind, then if this committee were to say to Doc, based on this letter from Fish and Game, can you please respond respectfully to Fish and Game regarding their request in their last paragraph about the research and monitoring, what is going on? Because the letter that they provided isn't about that. The letter they provided is actually about the mana of this committee. Yeah?
If we're going to do that, maybe we should look at another entity to also attend like a workshop.
So
Somebody outside without I'm not saying complete vested interest, but
I understand.
you agree there, Sam?
But the main emphasis should be on the survival of the native species.
Yep.
The only type of its class in the world. And and going back in previous times, wouldn't have known that. They would have said, oh, just like any other dune-laced galaxis. Or they wouldn't even call it dune-laced galaxis, So the reality is that they were there when we come here, and they should be there long after we're gone.
Well, maybe we should make a proposal for these entities to attend a workshop.
I'd support that. I think that's just something that's long overdue, getting everyone in a room around the table or in a circle to have a discussion about an update, to give an update on what's happening up there. I still stand by our decision because the reserve management plan talked about the removal of exotic fish. So that's what we did. In the meantime, and sort of then after, we've been talking about the success rate and survival of the Dune Lakes galaxis. So we just need to know how that's going. And you're absolutely right, Sonny, that we there's other things that we also need updates and information on. So, you know, I support that. Fish and Game are sort of putting a bit of pressure on us to pull this together, but it's necessary. But I also know that, you know, they rely on licenses being sold to provide an activity of trout fishing. So they've got, it's a double-edged sword.
Well, in some ways, we're going to get a knock on the door again early next year. Can we release more trout? That's going to happen.
You know, that's a 5-year decision. Right away, it's a 5-year decision because that's how long they last. You know, and then can you release some more? Then that makes it another 10 years. And then some more, and then makes it an et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You know, we haven't even given it a chance in regards to, so what we're saying, I'm saying that the reason the dune makes this going decline is because there's no trout in there. Well, the dune lakes collapses was there long before the trout was ever there. And they had their own environment to survive in, and they could do it quite nicely. Now the environment has changed. And then, you know, we have meetings and everything to make a decision on something, but regardless of that, regardless of the meetings and the studies and everything, in that time, are things declining? Are the numbers declining, or are they just not coming up to be monitored? You know, we don't even know whether they might be, have gone down into the deep. They might not be able to be monitored where they are. They're in close that you could be monitoring the same ones in close and the same ones in the deep. You know, the data is very, very sketchy and very, very unprofessional.
There's been quite a few involved trying to give us data. I see
We've been asking
the
for.
lady from North Tech has left. So there's no feedback there. Should we then, what I suggested before, propose a workshop?
So, Mr. Chairman, Tracy Dean has been listening to what you've been saying here and the discussion of the committee, and has proposed here in with yellow underneath it. I'm not sure if that could be enlarged.
It's hard to read.
That's more helpful, thank you.
Oh, yeah, good. Thanks, Tracy.
Then we have all these studies that have been happening in the lake, the otoliths and all this sort of carry on, and really we haven't had that data back in regards to clear data.
We've just got to make sure that we include everyone that we can. Dave West.
Well, Lake Rio, that was, last time I heard there was nothing in that lake, and that was at this table. Whether it just went off the radar or something like that. From the transfer, they're talking from the transfer to the deep lake in the forest, eh? I mean, what better place to translocate dune lake collectors than to a place where they have already inhabited and understand without fish.
Yeah.
Lake Kaiwi is to be the saviour, then so be it.
Okay, as I mentioned before, Stephen Saul from DOC is here. Does anybody know? Move on.
When the hot lights.
So, Mr. Chairman, this is the revised recommendation.
Yes.
Officers, based on the conversation that we've had here.
Okay, we'll
Is
put it to a vote.
for that, do they,
Sorry, Tracy.
is there a mover and a seconder who are
Yeah, I'll
happy
do
with
that.
this?
And I'll second that, Mr. Chairman.
All those in favour say aye.
Mr. Chairman, before we vote, sorry, there's, may we make statements about the corridor that's gone on here? So we've done questions and we've had a discussion, but if you like, but to actually make statements about this. Thank you. And so, Mr. Chairman, as the mover, the first statement here would be yours about your support for this, all of this.
Well, I think the discussion that we've just had emphasises the fact we need to have this corridor as soon as possible. And our next meeting, I think, is probably November, if that's planned with the council. Is that got to be decided by the council?
When the next date's not.
So whether it is this year or next year at the earliest. Karen, can you hear all that?
Yeah, I can. I just note that this is an election year. There's every
Yeah.
chance this committee will look very different come October. So I wonder if we're talking about having a catch up, would that be this term for council or the incoming term for new councillors?
Well, basically, the
Signage Collectors Committee was, or Research Committee was supposed to be the one that was really empowered to do that.
So should we move that before the council has the election?
I'd like to get some resolution around what's been happening up there, and I realise that the next meeting will be a new council anyway. So I suppose, you know, this existing council are the ones that made the decision. So I have a vested interest in getting an update on what's happened to date and what is the current landscape or the conditions up there in which we're trying to, you know, ensure the survival of the DLG. I think it's quite simple. Let's have a hui in the next 4-5 weeks and get an update.
The next council meeting is, next election is October, so I think we should have it before then.
I would support that.
So Mr. Chairman, my understanding is as this would be an informal meeting, not one of these meetings, yeah, as a gathering, it's more an operational gathering meeting. That could take place at any time.
What's your personal preference? To have it before?
Including urgency. So I would say keeping momentum here is important.
Yep.
It's a good value. And as Councillor Joyce Paki says, this committee with these members has done work in this space and is across all the issues and all the subtleties of what's going on here. Your members after the October election would be completely different from the council side. I certainly won't be here. But there are no guarantees that the council process will put Councillor Joyce Paki back on this committee.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So the continuity and the learnings, and to bring, if I go back to my earlier point, the notion of the table around which everyone gathers, I think this committee should be looking at an informal gathering to do that before October the 8th.
Karen suggested 4 to 5 weeks, so that makes it September.
And request updates. We could update on numbers or perceived numbers. Or population of journalist collectors.
So there may be an opportunity, Mr. Chair, for the members of the Taharoa Domain Committee to write to Tracy as the governance officer or to Hayley as the manager with a list of the subjects to be being discussed, all the matters to be being addressed. Yeah, so that there is then a framework. Yep. And that the other parties that are coming know what is expected of all of them. We're not coming with a blank sheet of paper. We're coming with specific agenda, if you like, which leads back to, yes, which leads back to the existing management plan, you know, which comes out of that, so that there's a clear, again, flow and continuity of what's happening, but that the members of this panel put to Hayley or to Tracy the subjects and the questions they want to be addressed.
Okay.
We're happy to coordinate that. That sounds like a good direction to go in.
And should we leave the date for Tracy and Hayley to determine 4 to 5 weeks, Karen?
That'd be great.
Okay.
Through the chair, I believe that we should actually have some form of action in regards to removal of the pest species from Lake Kaiwi, so that it has time to recover, and then it has time to come back to its natural. Everything is taken up, or it's, there's no residues, and then we've got something to plan with. The way it is, we have nothing to plan with. What are we going to do? Are we going to net them? And what are we going to do? Are we going to poison the whole fish to get something done? The whole lake's too big. West Kaiwi is quite a good control lake. Would be quite a good lake to actually do your research.
Are you suggesting that should be done on the same?
I think it should be done. It should be requested from DOC that it be done. I know there may be tuna in there, and there may be, you know, te wai and things like that, but what's the risk of those fish getting to? Well, we already know the risk. They say there's no journalist galaxies in there. But there was. And is that mainly just because of the pest fish? Or because of the space that they're in? So, you know, like from a technical point of view, they talk about occupying the spaces at little, or the side spaces as opposed to the deep spaces because of trout. Well, yeah, that's all very well, but it comes down to the size of the lake as well. Where you live, you know, you're not going to live like a house if you don't want to. If that's not what you were brought up with. Well, that's how you survived all these times. You survived in the environment that was natural. That's how the fish would be.
Do you want the removal of pest species and the timing to be addressed in the workshop? Or,
Well, I want to be able to say that we have a control lake. That's what I would like to be able to say.
A section where it's all the data comes in, there's sections of everything you're requesting, all updates, all data and progress to date, and then a steps forward options, like a brainstorming session, which would include that.
Yeah.
And I suggest
Big undertaking. Big undertaking.
to invite a couple of scientists who specialise in that fish and might have some ideas in that.
Thank you.
That species.
And I know the risk of reintroducing them is very real. So, but you have to do something. We have to do something, and just standing by and watching them increase over the years is not watching the guppies increase over the years. It's not really shouldn't be happening. Should be doing something about it.
I think, if I'm honest, one of the issues we have here is funding. So we've never really invested in this space. It's there is some goodwill from NRC, DOC, ourselves to give, you know, what's in the bucket already. But if we want to do something bigger, better, more in depth, then we need to sit around and seriously talk about how it's funded.
Sonny, with that, how quickly can that be done, in your opinion?
Well, it depends on DOC. It would depend on DOC and the decision to go ahead and do it.
What's your thinking?
No one collects kai from there as it is anyway.
So I would say that any action or recommendation for action would, along these lines, would need to be a long way away. We'd need to certainly get through other evidence-based gathering meetings so that everyone is clearly in the same space before a kind of like a 1080 of the lake kind of moment would happen. I think that would be very, very extraordinary. No, but I'm saying to clear the lake, Kaiwi, of all the other fish, to start again is like, that is an extraordinary ecological project.
Absolutely.
And the delicate balances and the distorted balances that are there now, they're not the original balances, but the distorted balances that are there. It's all trying to find its equilibrium. I would say without a thorough evidence base, this committee would be making a very unsafe decision just to be doing that without an evidence base today.
Are you talking in regards to evidence base in regards to survival of the June collapse in Lake Kaiwi at present day?
Sorry, so I'm coming from the perspective that if you want to get the gambusia, mosquito fish, out of Lake Kaiwi, yeah, because there are no trout there, and so it's now full of gambusia. If you say you want to get them out, and as you mentioned quite rightly, that what about the tuna, what about everything else that may be in there, the entire ecosystem of that, how do you selectively get the gambusia out without
Damaging anything else?
gene editing?
I actually don't think you can.
Genetic modification of those fish, because that will get rid of them and save your galaxids. Yeah, and Kaipara District Council doesn't have that tool in the toolbox. But what you're speaking of is exactly that, a targeted thing. Otherwise, it's complete annihilation of everything.
It's like a nuclear bomb, you know, that just on that lake, because, you know, nothing is going to survive that sort of any native species within that lake with those best fish in it.
Until they're gone.
It's too small.
So what I'm speaking to, Mr. Chairman, is that there is a lot in all of this. Okay, and that today, with no evidence here, we are safe if we say let's gather for hui to discuss these matters and bring all of these matters forward, because there's a lot in this and we cannot be directing it today beyond that, because we can't know what's out the other side of that yet, depending on what the story is. We may have a vision, and as I say, if I say to you, Sonny, that gene editing the mosquito fish gambusia would allow you to put June lake galaxids back in Lake Kaiwi, what is your response to that? And I go, I don't want the answer, because it's that kind of question that we need to ask these science people about where we're going, because what is the goal? Yeah,
We've been asking them for a long time.
So Mr. Chairman, with respect, I think we have a recommendation here, and there's a lot of very important discussion here, because no one wants these galaxids to go extinct. Yeah, but the sand is running out of the hourglass here. We can't just continue waiting. So I think it's a good idea to have, during the remainder of this term, hui to discuss this and see where we're at, a check with everybody.
Aaron, can I ask you what your thinking is on what Sonny has suggested, just last Lake Kaiwi? When and where?
Mute, Karen.
Probably making a cup of tea.
Sorry. Hey, I'm happy to roll with the hui. I think there's a few things that'll come out of it if we agenda or draft it right. I think we're probably diving into far too much detail today, and that's stuff that'll come out later. I'm just interested in an update as to what has happened between then and now and what the plan is going forward.
All right. Now we've got the,
Vote on the resolution. Would you like to see the resolution?
go that again, please. Yeah, thanks, Tracy. Like to vote on this proposal. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. All those against? Carried.
Forward.
Okay, thank you. Now, we've covered the Northland Fish and Game letter, Tracy.
That's a separate item and we need a mover and a second to pop that one on the table. That's all right. Next item.
Now, the next item is the Northland Fish and Game to the Department of Conservation. No,
Sorry, it's Northern Regional Council draft assessment report on the Taharoa Lake.
Six.
Yes, item 6.
a Northland Regional Council draft assessment report of Taharoa Lake water level fluctuation.
So I will take the report as read. I guess the key thing here is that the report demonstrated that the levels of rainfall versus levels of evaporative water loss has increased and is the most likely finding of the lake levels. There's also, we've got Savannah on the line who's representing Northern Regional Council. She has spoken to, I think, 5 landowners around the lakes about their water takes. And so she can speak to that specific item. The science report, there's no representative from NRC to speak to that. Any questions?
So I found that a bit sort of vague to reply to that. No one sort of turned up, did they?
To the water take?
Yeah.
I think they're very old agreements. The water takes, they do have consent in regards to their water takes, but times are changing now. So really, that should be a no-go zone. Take water from there, unless it's not an emergency, required by emergency.
Yeah, I can speak to that if you like. This is Savannah from Northern Regional Council. I'm the compliance monitoring manager for our primary industries team. So under what I do is the water take monitoring program. So yeah, so I understand that this kind of came about while questioning permitted activity water takes from the lakes came about in response to the low lake levels and just wanting to make sure that they weren't impacting those further. So we did do an investigation into the permitted activity takes. So obviously there's 2 consented takes on the lake. That's for the toilets and the campground there. And then there's some, a pretty historic permitted activity takes, which are there's 2 farms, dry stock farms that take for water use, for stock drinking. And those have been set up. I think one of them said that was set up in the 60s, the easement, and the other one before the RMA as well. So we have rules in our proposed regional plan about minor takes, and you can take up to 10 cubic metres per day and not out of an outstanding water body. So that's our permitted activity rules, but that's actually trumped by the RMA, which allows water to be used for reasonable domestic needs, including stock drinking. So our rules are actually trumped by section 14.2 of the RMA. That basically says that you can take water from anywhere if you're using it for your own domestic needs and stock drinking. So there were, out of the investigation that I did, I spoke to the two farmers, and one of them, I just sort of got a estimation of their water use based on their herd size, and then estimating a conservative figure for consumption per cow per day at 30 litres, which is probably a lot higher than they actually would be drinking a day. But so that worked out to be 10 cubic metres a day for one farm, and the other farm was only using the lake water very sparingly because of they have dams in most of their paddocks that you can see on the aerial photos as well. So they just sort of top up their reservoir when they need to. So and they have a smaller herd as well. I can't remember exactly. Yeah, but between 50 and 180 herd size. So their take is quite minor. So the biggest one is approximately 10 cubic metres a day, and that is quite a conservative figure. So there's those two. Those are the only two lines that come out of Lake Taharoa. And one of those lines are also used by the three properties there, those three houses just off Kaiwi Lakes Road, so they'll be using for domestic needs as well. There's also the lodge there as well, and I spoke to them, and they're not using from the lake. They've got their own tank water and things, so it's just those two farms and then the three household water takes off that same line.
So the permitted water take is about 200 cube per day, isn't it? Is that right?
200. Sorry. 10, yeah, sorry, yeah, it's 10 cubes a day is the permitted activity in our rules, but under the RMA, if you're taking under the RMA, there's no limit. It's just your reasonable domestic use.
I think in general it's 200 cube is maximum. I'm just going from memory here.
Oh yeah, yeah, not in our permitted activity rules. If you're wanting to take that big, it would need to be a consented take.
Savannah, thank you. So you've identified 5 water take activities.
Yeah.
Two permitted, and the others are historical. Do they pay for that water take, or is it just free? They just help themselves?
No, there's no sort of monitoring associated with that, or obviously no consent, so no admin fees or anything. So it's permitted activity. You don't have to pay.
It's free.
Yeah, that's it.
So this conversation took me somewhere, and it took me down this line of, if I've got some cattle, so I can take my trailer with my water tanker up there and drain that lake 10 cubic metres a day, and that's actually acceptable. Is that correct?
Well, it's just for your stock drinking needs. So yeah, it depends. Well, yeah, it just depends how much you need for your stock. But you can, under the RMA, you can take for reasonable domestic needs.
So, I suppose for me, I look at those lakes and I go, there's a real culturally significant element to them. And for people to have free take of that water is, for me, really disappointing. And I have to wonder, is there, because if you're not measuring it, I could tell you one thing and I could be doing something different. I'm not suggesting that's happening, but that happens. So how do we honestly know what's going on up there? And yeah, the report talks to evaporation and the drought, and we've had significant rainfall, and that lake is the lowest I've ever seen it. I'm just not convinced we know what's actually going on up there. It's I don't know if you've been up there lately, but that lake is significantly low.
Yeah,
All of them.
yeah, no, I understand. Yeah,
Yeah.
I
Big
think
one.
yeah, the RMA clause, I think it's 14.2, is you can take for your reasonable domestic needs and your stock drinking as long as you're not having an adverse effect on the environment. So
But
I
there
mean,
is an adverse effect, right? Because the water levels are low. So
yeah,
how do we say when enough is enough? And actually the water levels are at a level where they are so low that water take right now is not appropriate. How do we do something around that? And that puts pressure on council as well, because we're taking water to flush toilets and do whatever. But how do you manage it? Or do you just keep going, oh, well, it's all right because the RMA says so?
yeah, it's just we've put rules in place, and we've said no takes out of outstanding water bodies, which obviously includes Kaiwi lakes. But that's just been trumped by the RMA. There's not much, we don't have much jurisdiction to impose further conditions. So we can't, so in our permitted activity rules, we can say to put a meter on it and to give us water use records. We've got room to do that under our permitted activity rules in our proposed regional plan. But in the RMA, if they're taking under the RMA, we have very little jurisdiction to actually impose further conditions, as long as they're meeting that RMA rule. There's not much further that we can do, unfortunately. But it is also, I mean, it's captured there that it can't be causing an adverse environmental impact. So it would, I mean, from that report that our science team did, it sort of shows that it's not so much it's really unlikely that the actual activity of taking the water that they're taking, the amount that they're taking, is causing an adverse environmental impact.
Savannah, I think we need to ask the question as parents. Could I ask Jason from council's perspective on this?
So I can't speak for the council as a whole here, even though I mean it's the job of the mayor, but the Savannah's point regarding the RMA is clear. And a way forward, if you like, needs to be found within that framework of existing use takes and so on for the lake and with that system. So again, for this committee, needs to be working within those frameworks. That's a challenge, but I come back. I hear Councillor Joyce Pucky's commentary and concerns about the low lake level. And again, we're coming back to the evidence-based discussion that I just had earlier. And on page 43 of the agenda, or page 8 of this report, which there is a chart which shows very clearly the orange line of the evapotranspiration that's going out of the lake in a droughty time is greater than the rainfall that was going in. So what that means to me is that the lake levels have to drop based on that chart that you see there, unlike rainy times. Now, hopefully this year we've got more rain. I can tell you from being on the Civil Defence Committee for all of Northland that the rainfall on this coast significantly lower than the other parts of the region, the East Coast, and this is exactly what you see reflected here. The rainfall's lower, but the evapotranspiration kind of goes up. And if you like, if there's less humidity in the air, the evapotranspiration goes up as well. And there's 1,000 million wonderful scientific reasons for that. what all of that does is lower the lake levels. I think we have to measure very carefully our evidence base around what we're talking about. I'm not, I am aware of stock water use going from the lake, and as Ivana says, there's RMA issues there. The challenges in the science, again, that, you know, that if you like, it's a climate change thing. You sit back and you watch the sky, and it's going to keep changing. You know, it's very challenging for all of us, but I would like to congratulate Zavana and the waters team and the science team behind this report. It is really good, absolutely, evidence and discussion in a nature that's something that we've all thought about for a long time. Like, is it evaporating or is it not, or what's going on? But here is a beginning for that. The next version of this in the future will build on these shoulders and take us forward. But I go from a council perspective, in answer to your question, Mr. Chairman, we have to stick to the letter of the law. And right now, the law is the RMA in this space. And we need to be using all these best tools that we can to be finding our way through.
In mind, could I make a suggestion then that we start the ball rolling, addressing this question with the RMA? Wanting to know.
Well, what we're saying is that we actually can't. The law is the law.
So there is a complete review of the RMA underway, which is being put into three new bits of legislation. And there's a complete review, which is the Natural and Built Environments Act, the Spatial Planning, and then the Climate Adaptation Act are all coming through, which are going to be the future model of what is currently the RMA. So there is a shift into that new legislative framework, and there will be opportunities then, if the evidence base continues to grow, for discussion into the future. But I would say if there's a kind of an approach from me, it's thank you again to the Regional Council for having done this research, and I would like this to be, you know, reviewed and updated every couple of years. You know, that would be, you know, because I think this is very important for that future review of the RMA as it comes through, Mr. Chairman.
Might I ask a question? Like the transport evaporation, is that from the lake itself or from the land surrounding it? Yeah, I know it comes up in the lake. But the reality is that data from the land or is it from the lake itself?
Lake.
Yeah, but considering the temperatures, yeah. Yeah, so yeah, it's a negative all the time, eh?
Yeah, well, it's twisted according to this chart, more recently in 2019 with these kind of very dry summers that we've had. It's very interesting, but even the droughts of 2012, 13, 14, it was doing fine.
Yeah.
Based on this, it's extraordinary. They were very, very hot dry summers, but the rainfall had come as well. But that's what's changed. So this is a climate change story that you can see beginning, a new climate change story. I think it's fascinating, Chairman.
Have we got any more?
In the galleries, the public must stay.
Well, I can do it.
Thank you, Savannah.
Thank you.
Are we on item 7 now?
So I'd like to move this, Mr. Chairman.
That's quite see it. Yep.
I'd like to see
Who
it.
would like?
All those in favour?
Aye.
Favourite.
The item 7 now. Item 7, Taharoa Domain Campground fees review.
Again, Nadine.
Sorry. So, thank you. Again, take the report as read. Just a couple of things. This was a last minute addition. So the objective of this paper is to seek support to send to a council meeting decision paper to amend the campground fees on the Taharoa domain. So that's Promenade Point and Pine Beach campgrounds. Key things to consider, please, is I had a little bit of a look back, and the fees haven't been reviewed since at least 2017, so I can't give you a firm date, but it hasn't been certainly for at least the last 5 years. And as noted in the council's current fees and charges, campground fees vary from camp to camp and are subject to change without notice, so they don't have to go through the formal fees and charges process that a lot of the other council fees have to. But happy to answer any questions you may have.
They were reviewed. About 20, 2019.
2017 on the
Yeah, that was then. Come round again.
No questions?
When will the fees come in? I did read.
We're proposing, providing I can get this into the Auckland Council decision meeting, proposing that it'll be 1st of September. So it'll be the beginning of the month following acceptance from council, should it be accepted or approved.
Now, do we have any questions?
It seems you've done very, very good
Report there, Nadine, and we don't have any cover.
So with that in mind,
We have a mover and a seconder to accept that.
Can I ask a question? Just on the fee price, is there like powered sites and unpowered sites? The price is pretty much the same. Yet one is getting a more of a benefit because they're having power. How's that decided? Like, is that just in line with other campgrounds? And I say that because an unpowered site is $20 per adult, and for a powered, where they're drawing power, is 30 for the first one and then 20 thereafter. But kids are the same. But where is the cost absorbed from people drawing power?
Through the chair, yeah, it is. So we've come up with these fees by researching similar campgrounds. And I use the word similar because we're not like a lot of other campgrounds. Our biggest, I guess our closest comparison would be DOC, and the fees that we're proposing are aligned with what DOC charges.
So do you have greater demand for powered sites that we're not able to service?
No, I don't believe that we do.
Okay.
I think everybody has their own personal, certainly what I found is everybody has their own personal camping experience that they want for themselves or their families. And I think it's the same reason why people choose Promenade Point versus Pine Beach, even though there's a great difference in the facilities that are offered. It's just personal preference. And a lot of it is, it's just where they've been going for generations.
Yeah, thanks, Nadine. Had to ask.
Any other questions?
Nothing further.
Question. It may be very hard to answer. Would there be, or how easy do you think it would be to have a set of fees that are, I'm going to say, at this level for kaipara people, yeah, and they have to buy their space in advance, and then higher for people who are not from kaipara districts. I'm talking here, it's a wild card idea, but I'm just like saying, if one of the issues for Taharoa domain is the pressure that comes on the system, and if we're looking at local people versus other people from other places, has any consideration been made to that, or is it just we take all comers first in, first served?
Through the chair, it is first in, first served, to be fair. I think it's a dangerous ground for us to go on. It's highly popular, as I said, though, it is very generational. So we find that people come in, these are often people who come from, as far away as South Island, because this is just what they've done every year. What I have found as well, in the time that I've been looking after the campgrounds, is that locals especially, and I appreciate this, will tend to stay away from Pine Beach Promenade Point simply because it is so busy. So their personal preference is to stay away from there, and then they'll camp in the quieter months. But it's highly popular with out of towners, I guess, if I could say that. And I also think if that was a route that we were to go down, it would be very easy to, we're not going to do police checks or anything like that, or address checks, I guess, so it'd be very easy to fudge it. And it may put additional stress on staff if in that we're having to actually check that you've been charged the correct fee based on where you reside.
Thank you. It sounds like you've considered that, even though it's not in here. Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you for raising that, Mr. Mayor. It was on my mind too, because when you look around the country, you'll see things like, Friends of Waitangi, and then you've got Ngāwha Hot Springs. And if you're local and a resident and you can provide your mailing address, then you go onto a database, and that is how you get your discount. So there's a way of doing it if we wanted to entertain it. And one of the things that gets asked to me from our community is, we are paying for that space, yet we have to contend with anyone and everyone that wants to utilise it. So I applaud the conversation, because I think our community want us to ask it. Why isn't there some sort of discount when it comes to local ratepayers? So thank you.
And through the chair, I actually think that's a very different spin on it. And I understand what you're talking about as well, Councillor, because I think I'm from Hokianga, and when I go across the ferry, although I could say yes, I'm a ratepayer, so I can get across on the ferry and discounted rate. I personally choose not to, but I understand the concept. It's something that we can go away and have a look at.
That'd be awesome.
I would say, Nadine and Hayley, that these questions are coming from your two council representatives on this Taharoa Domain Committee on this item. I would say there may be other elected members when if this comes up to full council, who may also be very interested in this aspect of this. The fact that I hadn't spoken with Councillor Joyce Paki about this at all. And we're both generating questions in the space. So it's a lead for what may come next.
Thank you.
Hold on.
Any other questions?
Nothing further.
Okay, I'll just carry that. All those,
Need a mover and second there.
I move on. I'll second that. All those in favour?
Aye.
Thank you. And now item 8, pleasure. I would like to wish Karen and Jason the very best. They won't be, may not be attending another Taharoa Domain Governance Meeting.
Kia
It
ora.
both has been brilliant. Appreciate working with Karen and Jason.
O
Very
ngā
best.
mahi matua.
Thank you. Could I ask Sunny to do that, please? Unless you had something to say, Sunny.
Oh, no, I think, e tuana ki te tautau whiunga mima o te puaringa o te Taharoa Domain, ka mihi atu kia koutou katoa I tētahi, kia koe Jonathan, wai ana ki te mahi I a koe, so good to work with you, your experience, your knowledge and your input in regards to the welfare of our lakes and of our ratepayers. If that speaks volumes, kia koe karena,
Kia ora.
koe ana tō āhua, koe ana tō pakautu, me tō pānui e pāna, ki tēnei kaupapa, ātāhua, nā koe karena. Te aroha,
Nā mai.
whakanui ka koe. Kia koe te he mana o tō tīmata e noho I te rata, te tūru te tangatira, tēnā koe. Kia koutou mā ngā administration, tēnā koutou, ngā mihi atu. Kia tātou katoa, te atu pai o tō tātou ariki a I Kraiti. Me te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhi ngā taitanga ki te wairua tapu. Ake. Amen.
Āmene. We'll see you at the wānanga, at the workshop.
Ai.